Trump obviously won last night, a commanding victory for Donald Trump. Not really a surprise, but he was, what was the final? Was it 51 or?
Yeah, Donald Trump, 51%, gets 20 delegates. Ron DeSantis, 21.2%, gets 8 delegates. Nikki Haley, 19.1%, gets 7 delegates. Vivek Ramaswamy finished at 7.7% and gets 3 delegates. Those are his, even though he's dropped out of the race. He'll still have them at the convention. And then Ryan Binkley, pastor from Dallas, 0.7, and Asa Hutchinson, 191 votes statewide. After a year of campaigning, he gets 0.2%.
He did worse than Binkley,
and it was not even close.
Right.
Was not even close.
That is crazy. That is crazy.
Catastrophic for poor Asa.
Yeah. Ace is on suicide watch today, I think. Don't let him have his shoestrings or a belt. Let me talk now about what's coming. There's a new poll out for New Hampshire, but this is without any of the news that happened last night. So this is a poll that was taken just after Nikki Haley started to show some growth. So we don't know what it means today, whether it'll affect it one way or another. We don't know. But here is the latest poll from New Hampshire.
Yeah, this is New Hampshire, and it's, I think, American Research Group who did the poll. This is the 12th through the 15th of this month. So it includes yesterday, but obviously would not include anything after the results.
Correct.
And it has Donald Trump and Nikki Haley tied at 40 at the top in New Hampshire, followed way back with Vivek Ramaswamy and Ron DeSantis still on the both on the ballot at 4%. So
why do you think she's doing so well in New Hampshire?
Largely, it's because of the way the primary works. You're going to have a lot of independents and Democrats, and she's going to crush in that group, as she did in Iowa, by the way. But the numbers in Iowa are not nearly as high as they are in New Hampshire among those groups. She does very, very well in those groups, wins by wide margins. And that will help her there, but it won't help her in these other states. This is the problem of the candidacy.
Have you ever seen any research done on whether people switch and say, you know, I'm going to vote for the Republican and I'm usually voting for Democrat or vice versa, because they mean it, or is it just to screw with the election?
There are definitely some. The percentages are relatively small when you're talking about people doing what Rush Limbaugh used to call Operation Chaos back in, what was it, 2008. There's definitely some that do it. The majority of people who vote in those primaries, typically, at least according to the polls, are people who are either legitimately considering or undecided voters who are looking, or they are people who are deciding to vote that way for sure. There are always some, but I mean, like, for example, one of these states, I can't remember, it might have been, I can't remember which state it was now that I've looked at so many polls over the past few days, but it was like 2% of the electorate consider themselves liberal, right? So it's not a massive part of this. In a tight primary like the one in New Hampshire, it can make a big difference. And of course, in New Hampshire, you have a lot of people who are moderates, maybe libertarians, maybe people who are even leaning a little bit left that may consider Republican candidates, where you might not see that in, other states like New York or Massachusetts or Vermont. There's maybe a more independent electorate there in New Hampshire, which we kind of all recognize. But look, Haley has a chance to actually win New Hampshire. I don't know if this. My guess is it doesn't really hurt her for finishing third by 2 points behind DeSantis. It doesn't hurt her in New Hampshire. When we were talking about the way these polls came out or the votes came out in Iowa, there are a couple different dynamics, right? There was a question of whether Donald Trump could clear 50%. He did do that. There was a question of who would finish second. We saw with DeSantis squeaking out. I think he had to beat her, and he did.
He had to, or he would have been done.
Yeah. Nikki Haley, look, Nikki Haley, if you go back 6 months, this is a dream result for Nikki Haley, right? But she wound up being a little bit below expectations of the last couple of weeks, but still a decent showing, and she's still in the game in New Hampshire. And then Vivek Ramaswamy, who was promising all sorts of things yesterday with big turnout.
Drops out.
And he drops out almost immediately after promising to stay in. Of course, that happens every year.
So you look at Ron DeSantis, because people will say, "Hey, Ron DeSantis, he didn't make any inroads. People don't feel the way they thought they felt about Ron DeSantis." That's not true. He is, I think, if you're voting for Trump, he's either number one or number two for you. He's as far as you're either going to vote for Trump if he's the candidate, but you would rather vote for Ron DeSantis, or you're voting for Trump, and if he was out, you'd vote for Ron DeSantis. So it's almost in many ways the same voter as Trump. So why vote for Ron DeSantis when you've got Donald Trump to run? So it's I don't think his position in the party I don't think this says anything about him for a run in, what will it be, 28?
Yeah. Look, I think the polling shows that he's still popular within the party. He's usually the second choice of Trump voters. Of course, there is a much different profile as a candidate of what, the way they run their operations, right? Like, so, you're going to see some differences there. But what's interesting, it's like right now, most people would argue, even though Ron DeSantis finishes in second place, that Nikki Haley is really in second place in this campaign right now. She's about even with DeSantis nationally. She has a much better chance of winning a state that is coming up soon, which is New Hampshire. The next state after that, Nevada's caucuses are a little weird. So leaving them aside, you go with South Carolina as the next big state. And South Carolina is Nikki Haley's home state. You could see there's an argument there. But the difference here is, while Ron DeSantis is probably not going to be as competitive in any given state after Iowa as Nikki Haley will be in New Hampshire, there's a path to win with Ron DeSantis' approach. It's like he is going for the voters that like Donald Trump. And he got about 20% of that 70% of voters, and Donald Trump got 50 in Iowa. That's not enough, obviously. It's not enough to win. However, Nikki Haley, really is looking at these 70% of voters who really like Donald Trump and getting almost none of them. And if you can't get any of those voters, you have really no path to the nomination. And she can't seem to pick any of them off.
What your path is that you are hoping that enough Republicans will hold their nose and enough Democrats or independents. The parties have never been weaker than they are right now. People are identifying as independents. The average independent is not for socialism and all of this crap that Joe Biden is doing. But they also, I think, the average independent, many of them have been convinced by the media that Republicans want something radical, when really, no, we just would like a return to normalcy. A lot of Republicans were on that bandwagon when Joe Biden said that. We just didn't believe he would bring normalcy. We knew what he would bring. This. And that's the only path. It would be truly the independent vote, I think, that she would be going for. And she would need a lot of Democrats to make up.
Yeah, and it's
a lot.
You can't win Republican primaries. You can win them in individual states with that approach. You can. You can't win Republican primary elections as a whole with that approach. It just doesn't wind up working over the long term. So she's put herself in a position, and she's not trying to say she's liberal. She's not trying to say she's more moderate. She's just cut out that group, that part of the electorate. And for whatever reason, even though she hasn't been very critical of Donald Trump, in fact, over and over again, she said he was the right president at the right time. And they've all tried to walk this weird line where they don't say anything bad about Donald Trump for months and months on end. I don't know that there's an opposite approach that works there. No one's been able to find it if it does exist. But it's fascinating to watch this. She's, as you pointed out earlier on when we were talking, maybe it was Steve Deace we were talking to, she was a Tea Party candidate. When she ran, she was a popular governor among Republicans. And just her brand of Republican politics has largely just fallen out of favor. And she doesn't really have a path to win over this new energy of populism. She's from an older school Republicanism that actually doesn't poll badly in general election audiences. You mentioned a poll earlier today that has her way out in front of Joe Biden if she actually made it to the general. And that's really her main argument here, where both Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis in most of these polls can squeak it out over Biden. She usually has a 7 or 8 point lead over Biden, which is impressive. But there's no path for her to get to the position in which she can utilize that support.
So what is the poll number look like in South Carolina?
South Carolina has not honestly had a ton of new polling. I can pull up a summary here in a second. But, I think South Carolina being, I don't remember the date of it here. I have it in my calendar. South Carolina is still 39 days away. Yeah. So we have a while before South Carolina pops up. A lot can change. Right now, Trump at 54, Haley at 25, DeSantis at 12, and Asa Hutchinson at 0.5%. I don't know where Ryan Binkley is in the state, Glenn. We're going to have to check that apparently when we're monitoring these polls.
He's going to do great. I'm for that Bankerman. I love Bankerman. Love him.
But, look, Haley at 25%. If she has a good New Hampshire showing, you could see that closing and her being relatively competitive in that state, especially if something were to change. The one thing that people keep talking about, the Wall Street Journal has written an op-ed saying Ron DeSantis should drop out. And I think what people are not calculating here is that the DeSantis vote is not an anti-Trump vote. If Ron DeSantis drops out, I think it's probable the majority of his voters would go to Donald Trump, to Nikki Haley. And I think there's a strong possibility that DeSantis might even endorse Trump in that scenario. So, these people who are like, live or die, I don't want anyone but Trump to win. I don't think DeSantis dropping out is what you want. You probably want DeSantis to stay in and keep fighting to see if he can get one of these later states to turn around a little bit, or maybe just the tone of the entire campaign changes with some external event like a crazy legal development or something like that. That's probably what you have to look for. But Trump has a massive lead here. I don't know that he was ever beatable in this situation, Glenn.
Let me give you a new poll from the Economist YouGov. Asks U.S. citizens to predict who would win regardless of who they preferred. Of those surveyed, 44% said Trump, 35% said Biden, 21% said, I have no idea. Split down the middle regarding support, 43% say they were supporting Biden, 43% saying they were supporting Trump.